Update 3. My manager blocked my raise and smirked, saying, "If you quit, I'll replace you by Friday." So, I let him try for 1 week. And by day 5, the vendor contracts collapsed and legal got dragged into the mess. He started sitting in on my supplier calls. Just showed up one day and announced he'd be joining. The first one was with Reynolds Industrial, our primary aluminum supplier. James, their account manager, and I had a great relationship. We'd been working together for 4 years. These calls were usually casual check-ins, order volumes, delivery schedules, maybe some small talk about business conditions. Gerald turned it into an interrogation, started asking James aggressive questions about their margins, their production costs, why they couldn't offer better pricing. James handled it professionally, but I could hear the tension in his voice. After we hung up, he called me back on my direct line. "What was that about?" he asked. "New VP," I said. "Sorry, he's still learning how things work." "Okay, well, maybe give me a heads up next time before you bring someone like that on a call." That was uncomfortable. I apologized again and made a mental note to keep Gerald away from supplier communications. Unfortunately, he had other ideas. About 4 months into his tenure, I had my annual review. I'd crushed every metric. Savings were up. On-time delivery was at 96%, which was basically unheard of in our industry. Customer complaints about parts quality were down to almost nothing. I'd renegotiated the Reynolds aluminum contract and saved us $320,000 annually. I'd found a new packaging supplier that cut costs by 18% while actually improving quality. I'd reduced our average lead time across all suppliers by 4 days, which meant less inventory sitting in our warehouse tying up cash. I walked into that review expecting a solid raise, maybe even a bonus. I'd been making $78,000 a year, which was decent, but below market rate for someone managing a department that saved the company multiple millions annually. I'd done my research. Similar roles in the area were paying between $90,000 and $100,000. Some of the bigger companies were offering even more. I'd even talked to a recruiter a few months back just to test the market. She told me I was undervalued by at least $15,000, probably more like 20. Said companies were desperate for experienced procurement managers who actually knew what they were doing. Told me she could have me placed within a month if I was interested. I wasn't interested then. I liked my job, liked the company, liked the people I worked with. I just wanted to be paid fairly for the value I was delivering. Gerald sat across from me with this thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had my review printed out, which he slid across the table. I picked it up and started reading. Every category was marked meets expectations. Not exceeds. Not even exceeds in some areas. Just straight meets expectations across the board. I looked up at him. I'm confused. My performance this year has been significantly above baseline. We've had record cost savings, perfect quality metrics, industry-leading delivery times. How is that just meeting expectations? He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled like some kind of cartoon villain. Well, that's an interesting question. The way I see it, those results are what we should expect from someone in your role. You're doing your job. That's good, but it's not exceptional. I've saved the company over $2 million in the past year alone, I said, keeping my voice level. That's 4 times my total compensation. How is that not exceptional? Those savings are built into the budget, Gerald said. We expect a certain level of cost reduction year over year. You're hitting targets, which is what you're paid to do. This was gaslighting, pure and simple. Those targets didn't exist before I created them. I'd set the benchmarks through actual performance, and now he was acting like they'd always been the standard. Okay, I said, let's talk about the Reynolds contract renegotiation. I saved us over $300,000 annually with better terms and actually improved the relationship. That wasn't budgeted. That was proactive value creation. Gerald waved his hand dismissively. Any competent procurement manager should be constantly looking for better terms. Again, that's your job. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level. I understand budget constraints, but I've delivered significant value. The cost savings alone from my work this year exceed $2 million. I'd like to discuss compensation adjustments. He sat down his pen and looked at me with that thin smile again. Well, that's an interesting topic. I've been reviewing the budget and frankly I don't see room for increases right now. We need to be smart about spending. This was rich coming from the guy who just spent $15,000 remodeling his office with new furniture, a coffee bar, and some kind of fancy air purifier that supposedly improved cognitive function. The old office had been fine. This was just ego spending. With respect, I said, I've exceeded expectations across every measurable category. I've researched comparable positions and the market rate for this role is significantly higher than my current salary. I'm at least $15,000 to $20,000 below market. Gerald's smile got wider, more condescending. You know, I hear this a lot from people. They look at some online salary surveys and think they're underpaid, but those surveys don't account for everything. The stability of working here, the benefits, the work-life balance. When you factor in the total compensation package, you're doing quite well. I'm not talking about online surveys, I said. I'm talking about direct conversations with recruiters and colleagues in similar roles. The market is clear. Well, Gerald said, sitting forward, you're welcome to explore other opportunities if you feel undervalued, but I should tell you, in my experience, people who threaten to leave rarely follow through, and if you did quit, I'd have you replaced by Friday. Procurement isn't exactly rocket science. There it was. That smirk like he just checkmated me. He continued, apparently enjoying himself. I've managed procurement teams at much larger organizations. The fundamentals are simple. You find suppliers, you negotiate prices, you manage contracts. I could teach any reasonably intelligent person to do your job in a couple weeks. The idea that you're somehow irreplaceable is frankly a bit naive. I sat there for about 10 seconds just looking at him, processing what he'd said, processing the casual dismissal, the contempt, the absolute certainty that I was bluffing. Then I nodded slowly. That's good to know. I appreciate your honesty. Glad we understand each other, Gerald said. He picked up his pen again, a clear signal that the meeting was over. Now, I need you to prioritize the Reynolds contract renewal. I want it done by end of week. I stood up. Sure thing. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. I had some emails to write. Here's the thing Gerald didn't understand about procurement. It's not just about ordering stuff and negotiating prices. It's about relationships, trust, institutional knowledge that doesn't exist in any manual or database. Our main suppliers weren't just vendors. They were partners I'd cultivated over years. I knew which account managers would go to bat for us during shortages. I knew which plants could turn around rush orders. I knew who to call when something went wrong, and I knew exactly what to say to keep them happy. Take Reynolds Industrial for example. On paper, they were our aluminum supplier. We had a contract that spelled out pricing, delivery terms, quality standards, standard stuff. But the real relationship went way deeper than that. I knew that James, their account manager, had 2 kids in college. I knew his boss, Patricia, was nearing retirement and didn't want any drama in her final years. I knew their plant in Indiana had better quality control than their facility in Kentucky. So, I always requested material from Indiana even though it cost a bit more in shipping. I also knew that Reynolds had cash flow issues about 18 months back. Their biggest customer had delayed payments and they were struggling to meet payroll. They didn't advertise this obviously, but James and I had developed enough trust that he mentioned it over a dinner meeting. I worked with our accounting team to accelerate some of our payments to help them out. It cost us nothing since we were going to pay anyway, but the timing helped them avoid a crisis. 3 months later, when we had an emergency need for aluminum due to a production screw-up on our end, Reynolds moved heaven and earth to get us material on a 2-day turnaround. Normally, that would take 3 weeks. They bumped other customers, ran overtime shifts, and ate the expedite costs. James didn't even ask for premium pricing. He just made it happen because we'd help them when they needed it. That's the kind of relationship you can't build with aggressive emails and contract clauses. It takes years of showing up, being fair, and treating people like partners instead of commodities. All of that lived in my head. Sure, we had contracts and PO systems, but the real value was the relationships, the favors banked, the goodwill earned, the understanding that we'd take care of each other when it mattered. And Gerald thought he could replace that by Friday. I spent the next 2 days documenting exactly nothing. I CC'd Gerald on routine emails, attended meetings, acted normal. Meanwhile, I was updating my resume and reaching out to my network. I kept my feelers quiet, didn't want word getting back to Gerald that I was actually looking. I reached out to former colleagues who'd moved to other companies. Contacted a few recruiters I'd worked with before. Kept everything off company email and phone. Tuesday night, I had a call with a recruiter named Dan who specialized in supply chain roles. I laid out what I was looking for. Similar role, better pay, management that actually valued expertise. She laughed and said she had 3 companies that would fight over me. By Wednesday, I had 2 preliminary interviews scheduled. Both were with companies I'd heard good things about. Both were offering significant pay bumps just to get me in the door. Thursday morning, I had a video interview with a competitor about 20 meters away. Mid-sized operation, similar to my current company, but better managed. The hiring manager was a woman named Linda who'd been in procurement for 20 years. We clicked immediately. She understood the role, understood the challenges, and clearly valued what I brought to the table. She offered me the job before the interview was even over. $95,000 base salary plus quarterly bonuses tied to cost savings, better benefits, actual professional development budget. She wanted me to start as soon as possible. I need to give 2 weeks notice. I said. Take whatever time you need. Linda said. We're just excited to have you joining the team. I told her I'd send her a formal acceptance by end of day Friday. We shook hands virtually and ended the call. I sat there for a few minutes thinking it over, making sure I wasn't making an emotional decision. But the math was clear. $17,000 more in base salary, plus bonuses that could add another $10,000 to $15,000. A boss who actually respected the work, a company that wasn't run by someone with a fragile ego and a management book from 1987. Yeah, this was the right move. Then I drafted my resignation letter. Kept it short and professional. 2 weeks notice, effective immediately. I didn't mention Gerald's comments. Didn't need to. Just thanked the company for the opportunity and wished them well. I printed it out on good paper stock, signed it in blue ink, and put it in a folder. Wanted it to look professional. Final. I walked into Gerald's office at 3 p.m. on Friday. He was on the phone, but he waved me in. I stood there waiting while he wrapped up some conversation about production schedules that he was clearly dominating despite not understanding the technical details. He kept using terms slightly wrong, and I could almost hear the person on the other end trying to politely correct him. When he hung up, he looked at me with mild annoyance. What do you need? I'm resigning, I said, handing him the folder. My last day is 2 weeks from today. I watched his face go through about 4 different expressions in rapid succession. First was confusion, like he couldn't quite process what I'd said, like the words made sense individually but not together. Then annoyance, probably at the inconvenience of having to deal with this. Then something that looked like actual concern, maybe realizing this was actually happening and he'd have to follow through on his boast about replacing me. Then that smirk came back, his default expression when he thought he had the upper hand. Well, he said, unfolding the letter and scanning it quickly. His eyes moved faster than he was actually reading, just performing the act of reviewing it. I appreciate the notice, but we don't need 2 weeks. You can clear out your desk today. I'll have someone cover your responsibilities starting Monday. Perfect. Exactly what I'd hoped for. Your call, I said with a shrug. I'll need to do an exit interview with HR. I'll let them know, Gerald said. He was already looking at his computer, dismissing me. Make sure you leave detailed notes about ongoing projects and supplier contacts. Sure, I said, knowing full well I wouldn't be doing that. See, when you accept someone's resignation effective immediately, you're terminating their employment. They have no obligation to do anything beyond return company property. Gerald probably thought he was punishing me by not letting me work my notice. In reality, he just eliminated any responsibility I had to help with the transition. I went back to my office and started packing my personal items. Wasn't much. A few pictures of family vacations, some office supplies I bought myself because the company ones were terrible, a coffee mug from my alma mater, a plant that was somehow still alive despite being in a windowless office for 3 years. I did not leave detailed notes. I did not document my supplier relationships.